Hello everybody and welcome back. As always, I am Mateo311 and this is your channel for everything VR related. Today, we're talking about just how far mobile VR games have come along as we take a look at the new platform releases for Hubris. This video features a bit of tough love that everyone in the VR community needs to get through their heads, so even if you're not interested in the action-adventure title Hubris or non-PCVR games, you should still stick around for this video because there's going to be a huge lesson to learn. I previously reviewed Hubris back when it released for PCVR and found it to be fantastic but flawed. I'm happy to report that there's been significant updates, and both the PSVR2 and Quest 2 versions have definitely impressed me. Now there are of course links and timestamps if you want to skip ahead, but before we jump in, this video is brought to you by my sponsor Kiwi Design. They currently make my favorite Quest 2 Elite strap, which comes in multiple different versions. You can add an extra battery pack, high quality headphones, or even both. They also have other products like Valve Index style hand straps, and they just introduced a brand new RGB stand. Your controllers and headset magnetically connect. There's a charging indicator so you'll know when your headset's ready to go. And there's plenty of different RGB color options available. There's a link to Kiwi Design down in the description. And don't forget to use discount code Mateo311 for 5% off and to help support this channel. Okay, so let's start this video off with a controversial topic, and that's the fact that mobile VR games are getting a lot closer to PCVR quality. Now, I'm sure I'll see a bit of a backlash for that statement, and I do fully acknowledge that the Quest 2, even the Quest 3, can never remotely come close to the power of a PlayStation 5 or even a moderately powered gaming PC, let alone something like my PC Master Race RTX 4090. But there's many reasons why that power difference doesn't play such a significant role. We'll get back to that topic when we discuss the PlayStation VR2 version of Hubris. For now, let's focus on the Quest 2 version. Hubris is a title I called BS on multiple times. When the PCVR trailer first popped up, I figured the game would never look close to that good, but I was dead wrong. I know a lot of studios will go to great lengths to make their game look better in a trailer, but surprisingly that was not the case here. And when they said this title would be coming to the Quest 2, I also doubted that and thought it was just marketing to help hype this game up. Well, now that I'm making my way through it on the Quest 2, I am beyond impressed. We are looking at some of the best Quest 2 graphics ever, with some surprisingly good performance. You could easily put this up there with something like Red Matter 2. Now, as good as this may look, we know it's not quite PCVR level. Even if you have some pretty low system specs, there's just some things that a PC can do that mobile hardware won't be able to. On the Quest, the draw distance and texture resolutions are lower. We could definitely use some extra anti-aliasing to cover up some jagged edges caused by a lower resolution image. There's obviously some extra special effects missing, and everything takes on a slightly more cartoonish appearance, but overall, I'm still extremely impressed by what they were able to pull off. I'm sure people will still try to crap on the Quest 2 graphics here, but you need to understand that this is a near miracle for an XR2 chipset. Deep down, I am also a PCVR snob who wants something that'll push my RTX 4090 to the max, but unlike many other people out there, I accept the fact that that's just not reasonable in the VR industry. Lower spec Quest games are absolutely mandatory right now. PCVR had its chance, and both Meta and Valve threw tens of millions of dollars into VR games, but they still failed to significantly grow the player base. The burden of entry was just too high for VR to become mainstream, and you need a mainstream-sized audience for AAA budget games. Moving from PCVR to the Quest undoubtedly made VR more popular at the expense of lowering the quality of games. Over the past few years though, Meta and other development studios have made great strides for mobile VR optimization. Again, we are still not at PC quality, but we're moving in that direction, and the Quest 3 should help close the gap even more. Just the mere fact that Hubris looks this good and runs this well is a huge deal. But let's jump back to that PC power discussion as we use the PlayStation VR2 version of Hubris for more proof that raw power isn't everything. Hubris is now at least the fourth multi-platform VR game where the PSVR2 version surpasses the PC version. First, Dave Vills, the developer of Pavlov, stated that his game ran better on the PlayStation VR2 than his gaming rig with an RTX 3090 in it. Next, Song in the Smoke got the rekindled version, which surpassed what was on PCVR. Vertical Robot did the same with Red Matter 2, adding new effects and higher resolution textures. And now we could add Hubris onto the list of one of the best looking VR games ever. So the obvious question becomes, if a PC is so much more powerful than a PlayStation 5, why are the games looking better on the PSVR 2? Well, the answer really comes down to optimization and standardization. When developing for PC, there's an incredibly wide array of hardware to support. As such, developers never target the highest end PC hardware. Instead, they aim for what's most common, and right now that's around an RTX 3060 or lower. At the same time, this prevents developers from utilizing certain features such as DLS or ray tracing because only a small percentage of hardware out there may have access to it, so it's not worth the time to implement. And finally, the Windows operating system creates some additional overhead, meaning we're leaving some performance on the table. When developing for the PlayStation 5 or Quest 2, you know the exact hardware of every single user. This allows for an extremely high level of optimization, and all hardware features will be used to their maximum potential. This is how consoles manage to keep up with PCs in the flat game market, and while it's true PCs can usually run at higher frame rates or resolutions, plus when developers do focus on those added features, those PC versions can far succeed what's available on console, but this rarely happens in VR because the PCVR community is a niche of a niche. There just aren't enough people to justify the additional development time. This varying hardware can also cause a lot of additional issues, making testing that much more complex. Now, while these titles aren't VR, just look at the releases for Jedi Survivor and Last of Us. They were significantly broken on PC and still managed to run like crap even if you threw an RTX 4090 at them. So again, raw power isn't everything, and knowing ahead of time that everyone will have support for features like foveated rendering will go a long way into enhancing a specific platform version. But let's get into a comparison of all three versions. Personally, the PlayStation VR2 version is looking the best, but that's most likely due to the headset hardware itself. Colors really pop with the OLED panels, eye-tracked foveated rendering allows them to keep the resolution really high, and the base resolution of the PSVR2 is already higher than my Valve Index. Now, it's not an overwhelming difference between PC and PlayStation VR2, but I would give a slight edge to the PSVR2 version, though results may vary depending on what headset you're using and your PC hardware. I think what most people are really curious about is how does the Quest 2 version stack up, and here I have to say, much better than I expected. The most important factor, the Quest version does not break the overall immersion except for a few minor things. Usually this was just rough edges on low resolution objects. Two quick examples. Here we're looking out into space, which is normally a jaw-dropping moment on other platforms, but I just couldn't help but notice that the asteroids floating around the planet look a bit odd. The rough edges cause a contrast that does slightly break the immersion, and the same thing happened with some of the underwater foliage when the ship initially opens. This is an absolute wow moment on other platforms, and while it still looks good on the Quest, those minor issues did stand out to me. Now, if you really look for it, you can nitpick and notice other things like texture quality drops off pretty fast, but for the most part, it's really more a matter of the Quest owners just don't know what they're missing, as the other platforms just have a lot of extra flair. Particle effects, reflections, things of that nature. So the Quest version is definitely lacking some eye candy, but overall not too shabby. Now, for those really curious about Hubris, let me just finish off this video with a few additional updates. If you watched my original review, you know I thoroughly enjoyed Hubris, but found the combat to be a bit bland, and the parkour was occasionally frustrating. I'm happy to report that these aspects have been updated, and Hubris is now an extremely solid game that I recommend to anyone looking for an action-adventure title. My updated review score is an 8.3, and the pros of this title include stunning graphics, an interesting storyline, a wide variety of mechanics, and a lengthy single-player campaign. On the con side, even though combat has been updated, it still gets a bit repetitive, with not many different ways to engage the enemy. And that right there was your Hubris comparison and VR lesson of the day. Going forward, I'm going to be less reviewy when analyzing new games, and do something more along this nature. Please let me know down in the comments if you have any feedback to go along with that. While I do enjoy making reviews, they're unfortunately a time sink, and my community doesn't respond to them as well, so I'm definitely changing up the style in the future.
And that was today's video, brought to you by my dad, Mateo311. If you enjoyed it, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And if you're new here,
Consider subscribing.
consider subscribing.
Consider subscribing.
Consider subscribing.
Consider subscribing. We'll see you guys on next time.
We'll see you guys on next time.